welcome back to the Josh Calloway Podcast. It's been a little bit since we've been here, had a busy couple of weeks in session, but we have an exciting podcast here this evening that we have got a great guest, Mr. Mike Faris. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good, Josh. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, and I just, a lot of things have happened in the last couple weeks in our legislative session here in the state. And we just closed out our session today and a few hours ago before we started recording this. But one of the great things that happened to me in the past 2 weeks is that I've met you, and we had some time on the phone and talked with each other, and I found out and want to make sure people know that you are running for U.S. Senate, and you're from Hardin County. And so I wanted to get your name out there, let you introduce yourself to people, find out more about you, and let people know who you are. And this is going to be, in my opinion, a bloodbath of a seat. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are interested in it. And I've made it clear that I'm personally looking for a fighter, looking for somebody to get in there and fight. And so I wanted to bring you on and just let you tell people who you are and what you're about and what your intentions are, why you want to go. The first thing I think would be good to know, just tell me a little bit about your background. I know you served in the military, your family, just some things about you personally.
Yeah, I was in the U.S. Air Force. I started in about 2005, just shortly after I graduated from Central Hardin. And so before I came to Hardin County, I was actually an Indiana boy. So I was born in Harrison County, Indiana. But at 3.5 months old, I was put in foster care until I was about 3.5 years old. So that foster family was in Sonora, Kentucky. And as luck would, as I would say, God bless me, because that's what happened. But as it would lay out, I was in Meade County at those in that beginning stages of life, and ended up in the CPS system, and then was given to a woman who did pretty much foster care, had 3 kids of her own biologically, good old farm folks, raised tobacco and hay, did some cows, pigs, things like that. And then at 3.5 years old, I was ripped away from their house and given back to my biological mother. And so from that age until 12, there was this relationship that stayed and was established between myself and that family. So when schools would let out during the summer and the winter and all that, I would go back to that family for those off periods and stay connected with them. And so really good God-fearing people. And at 12, I had gotten into actually enough trouble as a unstructured and unguided child in the state of Indiana, southern Indiana, and was able to make a choice to kind of raise my hand and say, hey, what if we tried this option instead of a boys' home? And so they did what they call a parental guardianship, which is, kind of similar to an adoption, and just doesn't really take the biological parents' rights completely away. And so from 12 until I graduated high school there at Central Hardin, I was with that family who I call mom and dad, and that's who I see all the time at events and all the gatherings, right? Yeah. And so went to church with them and all. And so in the Air Force, I, developed a trade to work on Black Hawk helicopters, which is what I'd really wanted to do, and it specifically asked for that. I was very interested in that machine. Spent some time in Iceland, England, and then once I separated from the Air Force, I got out and kind of went back home for a little while, did some factory work, oil field for a year, and then not very long after, got back into helicopters with the contracting world, and would then see myself in Lexington at the Bluegrass Army Depot for a while, building special mission aircraft for the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. And that's where I found out about the ability to go to Iraq and Afghanistan with these other contractors and kind of go see some stuff over there and obviously make money and try to do what I thought was the right thing. And then actually in about 2013, after I left Fort Knox, working there on helicopters as well, I did some commercial aviation work for a company called Republic. At the time, it was called Chautauqua Airlines. Brian Bedford, who was actually just appointed as I believe the FAA administrator. He was the president and owner of that company. They consolidated Chautauqua Shuttle and Republic Holdings down to Republic Airways, which he was the one that actually got him out of, put him into and got him out of Chapter 13 when they were trying to get rid of their 145 airframes and go streamline E-175 or the E-Jet as they call it. So in my opinion, I thought that was a good pick because he's a guru at the FAA and kind of regulatory stuff, and he understands it all very well. But then I got a call from a company in California. They seeked me out through a guy that used to work for me in Afghanistan, and they said, "Hey, we bought some auctioned helicopters from the Army. We're going to put them into use in wildland fire and utility construction, and we'd like to have a guy come and set us a maintenance program up." And in those beginning stages, it was just kind of like, I'll advise you. I like what I'm doing. I was supervising maintenance in Louisville at night, and I was close to home, didn't have to leave. And so with the whole overseas thing, the wife and I had kind of made a soft pact, like I'd stay home and, not really travel so much anymore. Then had a kid, obviously in 2014. So that solidified that foundation of staying. Yeah. And then I just made a deal with him. I had a talk with my wife, and she said, "You know what, this might be the way." Spent about 5 years with that company. Got my name out there enough to where I was able to create my own company called Prime Hawks, which is where we basically just service these Black Hawks across the country.
Yes, sir.
Who use them. We've got 21 or so customers from anywhere from northeastern Kentucky to California, all across the states that we do servicing for their aircraft.
Yes, sir.
So
it's kind of interesting. I have two of my brothers. I have four brothers, but two of my brothers, one of them does structural aircraft maintenance still, and the other one was in the Army Reserves and was stationed at Fort Knox, and he actually did electronic maintenance on the Apache helicopters when they were there at Fort Knox. So it's kind of interesting. That background, I know it was a passion of my brother's, and he's followed it all over the country and ended up in Pittsburgh and works there for a company now and does that type of work. But he's extremely passionate about it. He's always sending us pictures of these helicopters that they've totally redone, and their first flight out after redoing them. So it's neat. When you were in the military, I guess that was what you were doing in the military, was that type of work, maintenance work?
Yeah, so they called us crew chiefs. And so, basically we were, in the Air Force, they have their own job codes where, like the Army, if they're crew chiefs, they fly with the aircraft. And, not to, disrespect the Army, but most of those guys are gunners, right? They're called crew chiefs, but they're not really getting so much the technical knowledge in those early stages like I was able to do by actually tearing them down, looking at them, repairing them and putting them back together. And so, over the last 20 years, the stuff I've learned, it takes you a while because there's so many pieces and so many systems. And so it takes you a while to understand how all that works. And so I think that's just what's made me marketable as far as that goes. And I've been able to, actually give other men jobs off of that same thing. So that's, for me, that was what it was all about. It was to chase that dream of being able to continue doing what I enjoy. Obviously it doesn't come without sacrifice.
Right.
I mean, everything is requires a sacrifice to be a little bit successful. So, but being able to help others and other like-minded people who, are really just solid in their foundation.
Yes, sir.
Non-budging, willing to fight. And so it's been a 20-year fight to get here. It wasn't all roses and daisies, but, it's worth it. It's been worth it. I still enjoy it. And I don't want to quit it, so
yes, sir.
I'll be here until, I can't do it anymore, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service. I appreciate the fact that you were willing to do that, and anybody that's willing to do that for our country. And so I appreciate that. You brought up the fact about your wife. You have one child, or is that?
One kid named Aiden. He's 10 years old.
Awesome. Good. So let's come up to where we are now. I just learned a couple weeks ago who you were and started looking online, and you had put a few things out there. And to be honest with you, I didn't realize that you were from Hardin County. I found out a little bit about the lawsuit that you've been involved in regard to the federal government and all the COVID things that happened to us and the government overreach. And through all of that, we here at the state dealt with a lot of issues with the governor that we had, and locking the state down, refusing to bring the legislature in, telling people they can't go to church, and, just crazy government overreach. And we've learned a lot about what happened during COVID time, and our eyes have been open to a lot of things as a result of that, from the education system to a lot of other things. But you've been involved in a lawsuit for a good while that has kind of opened your eyes, and we've talked a little bit about it in regard to some of our current laws and how bad they really are for the situation you dealt with. So talk maybe a little bit about that lawsuit, just fill people in as to what you've been doing and dealing with the federal government.
Sure. Well, myself, I had seeked out a doctor in New York, Dr. Russell Sorosky, who would hear me out over this whole mask thing, which for me, I can't wear them for very long, especially not on a 4-hour flight to go to Dallas, from here to Dallas and then Dallas to the West Coast.
Yes.
It's just too much. And so I think, I can't really pinpoint it, but it probably, that anxiety that comes from that, that causes the issue, probably stems from earlier childhood things, but neither here nor there. The disability is there. It's very real. And so before Joe Biden instituted the mask mandate, or the FTMM is what they call it, the airlines instituted their own mask mandate of their own will, right? I guess through whatever failed guidance they were given.
Right.
That these masks were going to stop this respiratory virus, which they don't. I mean, if you
right.
look at the science behind it, I mean, it doesn't support it.
And they knew it didn't.
And they knew it didn't. And even in the beginning, they said, actually, Anthony Fauci himself said, you're only providing yourself a placebo to don these, because that's all you're bringing your anxiety for the thing down. But for some, it made the anxiety worse, right? For me, now, again, the airlines broke the law in the beginning and broke what I call the ACAA, which is its short term of Air Carrier Access Act, which is under 14 CFR 3D2. And under that law, it basically tells the airlines, or instructs them, not to discriminate against anyone with disabilities. It doesn't matter what it is, right? So in doing that, they were asking for kind of like, basically, we want a certificate from your doctor up front, which the ACA says they cannot do. If we do grant you a mask exemption, we will probably move you to an isolated portion of the plane, which didn't make any sense, because it wasn't even months later, they were jam-packing everybody into the same plane right next to each other,
right,
donning them and doffing them for eating and all this stuff. And so supposedly COVID was supposed to stop while you were chewing on your peanuts. But so then the DOT issued a notice to them and said, hey, you have to follow this law. But then that was pre-Biden. So when Biden put out his, when the CDC put out the guidance, he put out a mandate with the FTMM. And that mandate basically said that everybody in the transportation system, regardless whether it was by air, land, sea, whatever, they would wear a mask, right? And but in those CDC guidelines were exemptions, the same as in the security directive that was created out of thin air. And the TSA can do that because of the Patriot Act. So it's those things like that are just, it's all building the wall of negativity towards the people. And so anyway, I had submitted these letters to them, submitted the negative COVID test, another thing they cannot do according to the ACAA, again, breaking the law. And so, but I did it anyway. I thought, well, I'll try to follow the process. And so give them the exemption, give them the negative COVID test, and then a private company tells me that my disability does not qualify to be exempt from this mandate, which is not a law, which they lied to you when you boarded the plane and told you it was a federal law.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, the only thing Congress ever voted on was Rand Paul's bill to stop it.
Right.
And that never passed because it didn't make it over to the House, right? But he tried. And that was the only thing Congress ever had anything to say about it. So it was never a law. And they lied to you. And we tried to sue them for that by basically telling you a lie, misrepresenting law. And so anyway, filed the 13 DOT complaints. Been 4 years, I still haven't heard a word from them. And as a matter of fact, before that, I sued the TSA the day after that lawsuit was filed, I was put on a terrorist watch list. We lost that case in the in the Sixth Circuit with the TSA because there's I think it's called I've misplaced the name of it, but it's under some 21 code where basically if there's any lawsuit filed that's similar in the Court of Appeals, wherever the first filed suit is, they must all marry that way if it's in the same injury time frame. There was a lawyer there that basically just sues the TSA every day. Like that's what he does. And so because he filed in DC before we did, all of that got transferred to the DC Circuit where they were all liberal judges and basically gave him a scathing negative report. Like basically told him, I can't even believe you brought this suit here. And so all of our suits, we had a coalition of people that individually filed these pro se suits. We were all working together because it took a village to figure out which roads to go down because none of us were, legal scholars and none of us had attorneys. So anyway, on the CDC and airline lawsuit, we just recently passed a motion to dismiss phase. And now we're waiting on Judge Ben Beaton in the Western District to decide on a motion for judgment on the pleadings, which is kind of like a summary judgment. A little early because we were supposed to go into discovery, but the airline council basically told them that they had found the statutory text in the law that allowed them to do what they did. And so in that lawsuit, we charged them with 37 counts of violation of law, from federal to state to constitutional. Almost every one of them except two were rejected because they were preempted by some other law. And the two that stuck was the Rehabilitation Act and the California Unruh Act, which is a state law. Both of them are very similarly discriminatory related. The Rehabilitation Act under Section 502 covers basically their legal obligation under the CARES Act, the federal funding that they accepted, that they're not calling federal funding because they said that it was taken for paycheck protection versus what they called for like shareholder dividends. So they're just tweaking it exactly how they want it to try to get it all thrown out. And I hope obviously the judge overlooks that, or and sees it for what it is, because it's really sad that they would even be arguing that. I mean, you took taxpayer money, you used it to keep your airline in business. This law says that when you do that, you will follow these laws.
Right.
And so under that law is not really where we're going to do a lot of good as far as accountability, other than basically telling them they're wrong. But it's the Unruh Act that has the monetary value, that has the penalization ability in it, because it's a violation of a state law that allows for penalty, to a degree. But anyway, as far as the DOT, right, we filed the 13 complaints. It's been 4 years. We haven't heard anything. And so in the ACAA, the way the language of the law is that if they do discriminate against you, the airlines, that you can file a DOT complaint. Then the DOT complaint, or the DOT will investigate the complaint, and then they have the option to accept monies on your injury. But you don't get anything but a letter that says we've held them accountable.
Yeah.
So with that being said, there was a member in our coalition of people named Aaron Abadi who then took his to the Fifth or Sixth Circuit and sued the DOT, sued the DOT in the Fifth Circuit, I believe, and told the court, hey, we need to hold the DOT accountable for their failure to act upon the law. And the court came back and basically just said, well, we can't force them to do their job. Like, that's not what we're here for. So where's the statutory scheme? There is no statutory scheme in place if there's no due process or line of accountability for these people. And it wasn't just me. There was several others that never even heard about us. We still don't even know about them. I do get every once in a while people reach out and say, man, thank you for fighting this because I've been fined $10,000. I still owe the government money over this. And at minimum, I think, because here's the interesting thing to me, these DOJ lawyers that were attached to this case to the CDC, which have now basically been thrown out because Judge Mizell struck the mandate down. as violating the APA or Administrative Procedures Act. And so basically that was where they failed to provide the notice and comment to the people to allow the mandate to even take place, because they said it's a national emergency and we had to do it so quickly. Yeah. But yet for 8 months, they never did that until Joe Biden was around, right? So there was no emergency. They had plenty of time to submit this thing for notice and comment. They violated the law. Judge Mizell in Florida shot it down. And so in the funny game of the way politics and law work, as soon as that was done in that district court, the DOJ appealed it, wasting more of your tax dollars, right? All to allow it to just become moot, because they knew they weren't going to re-up the mandate. So if they just let it go away, they say, well, there's no injury now, so we're just going to dismiss all these claims because it's all gone and you can't do anything about it. And they even tried to go after him for what they called evading review. It was all shot down by liberal judges in an appeals court. And so that's also a problem, right? And to just speak on that, like at this point, and I'm going to go a little off topic here, but this all goes back to, I think we got to get the power back to the people. Right. And I'm talking even these these district courts, these judges that are appointed by presidents have been done since 1789. During a different time when everybody was for this country and for this country alone as citizens. And that's changed. There's allegiance to these other countries that are not in our interest. And these people are holding these seats and voting and judging and picking and pointing. And so it's really no different now than it was in 1773 when they tossed the T, right? Because it's a one-man rule. Yeah. So whoever's in that seat at that time is picking that district judge based on whatever political ideology, some odd, perplexed, un-American thing, right? No matter who that is.
And many of them lifetime appointments.
Lifetime appointments. And they're there for so long. And listen, they're not ruling on these laws unbiased. Right. They are injecting their own political ideology in the actual opinions and orders. Correct. And we've seen that with every single case except mine. Now, Judge Beaton is a Federalist. He was appointed by Trump, which I thought was cool. You know, I was like, oh, great, maybe we'll get a shot here. But we had other Trump-appointed judges did the same thing, shot it all down. So for me, like at this point, we need to go back so far to start repealing things like that Judicial Act of 1789 and say, hey, let the people vote on these judges now, because we can't trust you guys anymore. And because of the lies of the mask, because of the lies of the vaccines and what they were supposed to provide you, which was this idea of quote unquote safety, everyone threw their freedoms in the air. Right. And there was obviously a lot of people that didn't go along with it or didn't want to. And when they didn't, they got penalized hard. Luckily, I was able to, play the little game I had to play to get where I needed to go to keep my livelihood, because I knew, eventually I'm going to get banned from one of these airlines. And I did. It was American Airlines. They banned me at a ticket counter for trying to basically buy a ticket after I'd fainted on a flight with a pre-board flight for United, because I put the mask on. I said, oh, I'll put it on for you. And now the tensions are so high, right? Everything's going crazy. You start to black out a little, and then boom, there it's gone, right? You're done. And next thing you know, you're, okay, what happened? All right, well, let's talk about it. And now they say, oh, well, now you're a flight risk. You can't take this flight because you just fainted. I've given you the letters. I'm in a lawsuit, right? The action just happened. It's proven. There you go. That's the proof. Please let me go home now without a mask. Oh no, you can't fly. And they got you. They're tipping the scales to their benefit. So, I went to the American counter, tried to get a ticket, and the woman was obviously raging mad I didn't have a mask on, which, interestingly enough, in that space, they don't own it. So it's governed by the ADA. They can't tell me to put a mask on there. Yeah. And even when they called the cops came over. They say, hey, what's going on here? I said, well, this woman's trying to tell me to put a mask on. I have an exemption. I'm not going to do it. And they're like, oh, just keep up the good fight, both of them. So it's pretty cool. But, we're waiting on that. We should hear something back from Judge Beaton soon. And like I said, his opinion and order was pretty cleanly written. And a couple of times I think he was actually, I don't want to say take sides, but as far as the law was written and the way that the airline counsel was arguing, he said, hey, no, he's kind of got you here, man. You broke the law. You got to show me something else, or we got to go this way, So, But they're not judging on law based on law anymore, most of them. And they're judging based on their own political agenda.
They either push their own agenda or they try to make the law. They legislate from the bench. And we've seen that in Kentucky over and over with cases that we've had to go to district courts, and then, things that have went on up. And they inject their ideology into it. The Constitution means nothing. Current law means nothing. And you made a great point a little bit ago that we have created a government so big that most people are scared to death to take it on. They either don't have the financial means or they don't have the wherewithal to push against it. And so, I congratulate you for being willing to put your own money, I'm sure, and time and effort, reputation, everything on the line to say this is not right. We had a situation there on the House floor. They changed the rules. They said you can vote from your office and don't come to the floor without a mask. And so we went through that for a few days, and finally some of us were just like, this is crazy. We ain't wearing a mask, So we went to the floor without it. Nobody said nothing, and it was contagious. It wasn't long, and several people were coming without it. And, we just moved on. The Lexington Herald wrote a hit piece about us, and everybody forgot about it after that. But we seen so much of that overreach through COVID, and you have decided to run. This is a huge seat. This is massive. I mean, we're talking about in Kentucky, Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, specifically those three names, have allowed Kentucky to punch way above their weight, congressionally speaking. McConnell being the majority leader and minority leader, Rand Paul just having the platform that he has, and Massie has built a platform as well. And we have other people here that have done good things, that are chairing big committees. But this is a huge seat. So do you think that some of what you've dealt with through this lawsuit and what happened with COVID, has that been part of the motivation that has brought you to this decision?
It has been one of the few, yeah. But, even as a youngster, I've been fighting the government my whole life. And I was kind of pulled, like I said, at that 3.5-year-old age back into a CPS system and a welfare system. And so, I understand that welfare system pretty well because I also watched it get abused, and not to the child's benefit. And so there's that part of it too, because the welfare state has to end. We got to get personal responsibility back into the minds of Americans.
Right.
And get off of this idea that, just because I have these two fatherless children that I must, the government must support me. Because what that is that once you get in that system, it is a vicious cycle.
Yes, sir.
Of staying there. And it's by design.
Yes, sir.
These things were created to keep you suppressed in that zone. Keep your vote coming in because you're saying, thank God I have this thing. And as soon as you try to get off the thing, then they just rip the rug out from under you and go, hey, that extra $1.50 an hour you're making off of this, subsidy program, you might be making $12.50 on average on the welfare system. You go find a job you like, you think you might excel. You're making $14 an hour, so it's $1.50 an hour more, but now you got to pay for fuel. Now the kids got to have daycare. Now they got to have lunches or whatever packed and all this stuff. So they're not basically pushed to get off of it.
Right.
There's no motivation.
Right.
And so obviously that needs to be changed. Now, I don't think there's much that could be done up there in that other than basically having the conversation here with the statesmen and women that reside here to correct that issue,
yes,
right?
Sir.
But because that's one of the big or few big issues with
right.
the state. But yeah, obviously just seeing the way everything's written against the people over the last 50 years. And then the abuse of all the laws prior to that, which go back to our founding documents.
Right.
And just like that Judiciary Act, of 1789, you're talking, what was it? Just not even a decade later, they're like, hey, we're going to give this power to the president because guess what? Everybody at this time is all America first. We just got done fighting a tyrannical government, and we all need to be here. Let's give some of that power to this guy that we know is going to have our interest in mind. And then as the years unfold, they learn how to get in there and play the chess game, and then they become something they're not supposed to be.
Yes, sir.
And so for me, that's what there is no common folk up there other than maybe Massey and Rand, right? And they've been there a while, which hopefully I think, well, I would want to hope that those guys would be for term limits. I think that needs to be a big deal here in the state and across the board because it wasn't designed to be a career thing. It was the common folk went up to do their duty, a civic duty, to give back to the people, to make sure the machine ran well oiled, and then go back home and do what you're good at. These people, most of them don't work with their hands. They can't fix a motor. They can't build one. They can't fix a leak in a sink. They don't know what it takes to abide by the laws they're passing, which is a problem.
Yes, sir.
So they just sit up there, and I hate to say it, but in their suits with their pens and their paper, and they just make all these laws that nobody even really ever knows about until it's too late.
Right.
And so I think, a lot of people use the term, the windshield's bigger than the rear view, but I think at this point we need to make that rear view a lot bigger. We need to go back in time a little bit now and go, hey, let's repeal some of this stuff that is really obviously can be accounted to lining pockets and making backdoor deals. And so can I do it by myself? Absolutely not. Will it take more than a term? Sure, maybe so. But the thing is, you have to start voting for people who are, these people don't look like me. They don't talk like me. They don't act like me. I've never heard them, talk about the things that normal folks talk about at dinner. They're not struggling with these problems, and they've never faced them. And when they do, it's a big deal until it ain't, and it just gets pushed to the side to become the next clicky thing. So,
well, you brought up several things. I'm going to jump into a couple of them real quick. You brought up the welfare issue, and we at the state level hear about that all the time. Anytime you try to address it, it's always, you're taking food out of little babies' mouths and you're causing people to starve to death. And I think Ronald Reagan maybe had made the statement that you don't judge a welfare program by how many people you have on it. The success of it is judged by how many people you get off of the program. And so it definitely is something for specific to Kentucky that needs to be addressed when we have, over 40% of the people not working are able-bodied people that could be working. And so a lot of those are cultural issues for sure. And then when you talk about us electing people, the type of people that we elect, I've said this often, and one of the things that I hate about being in politics is how people treat you different when you get elected. And a lot of the people that treat you different treat you that way because they want something, or they wouldn't care who you were if you weren't elected. It's that type of mindset. But I've said this, that we elect one of us to represent us. And so that's all we're doing. We're just looking, saying, hey, who's willing to go do that and be what we need? And it should just be one of us that's in that position representing us.
And those folks, a lot of folks I think who are like-minded, they have a lot of great ideas. Mm-hmm. They show up to town halls, they show up to events, they show up to meetings, but they don't want that pressure. They don't. How do you thrust somebody, small town guys, into this big pressure bubble and pressure cooker to go and try to do something that makes a difference, right?
That's it.
And for me, seeing what I've seen over life, I was raised amongst gangsters for a lot of the beginning of my life, and then I went to go be a farm boy. And so I know how to relate with basically every walk of life in between. I've been across the globe. I've culturally interacted with a lot of people. Some people you can barely understand when you talk to them. And so it's easy for me to just pause a moment and go, hey, what is the issue? Because I am a problem solver, and I've been good at that. Not to be egotistical, but I've done very well for myself, considering the roadblocks that I've had.
Yes, sir.
Now, I thank God for the ability to do that, because he gave me the mind to make those choices. And even when they were bad and they weren't the way he wanted them to be, he found a way to show me out.
Yeah.
So as long as you follow that path, that's easy. But common folks don't want the pressure. And for me, I can do it. I'm not worried about it. These people don't scare me, because at the end of the day, they're just men like you and I. And so hopefully.
I've told you on the phone the first time that we talked that it is a must that we get a fighter in this position. And you're right, a lot of people do not want that pressure. And even at a state level, I can't even imagine what it's like at a federal level. But at a state level, when you take a stand and it's the right thing to do, but there's a lot of push from whether it be the lobbyist groups or, special interest groups that are against it, if it's constitutional, if it's morally right, whatever the case may be, you see people, they fall like flies. It's just, they're going to give in to the pressure, and we've got to get people in Congress that do not give in the pressure. If that pressure is coming from outside countries, if it's coming from lobbyists, if it's coming from special interests, if it's coming from the commander-in-chief, wherever that pressure is coming from, we need men and women that are willing to take the pressure on and do what is right for the people.
Absolutely. And that's why, the campaign slogan is integrity for a common sense Kentucky, because it all starts with integrity.
Yes, sir.
Every bit of it does. If you can make that tough choice and you can stand by it, because really we're only all a product of the information we have. And we need to get over this idea of changing our mind when we have more information. So I can be firm on something and then learn that there's things I don't know. And it's okay to go, hey, well, actually, you know what? You are right. There is an avenue to this that could maybe find a common ground. I understand that part of it. So it's okay to look at something and like, let's say you think something's negative, 100% negative. You're like, I don't want no part of it. And you go, well, hey, look, and let's exclude money. Let's exclude bargaining. Let's include ideas that are beneficial to the people. If the idea that rebuts the no is beneficial to the people, then we can work with that. But when you're a hard no on something because you can see clearly what's going on, it's a hard no.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
There is no changing that. And so for me, that's another big point of it is the votes, right? I don't care if they never put me on a national television station. I just, hey, if it's not good, no, it's not going to happen.
That's right.
I'll vote no on it. You can try to kick me out. You can, whatever you want to think you can do.
Yeah.
At least I tried to go up there and stand firm on the ground and do it for the people. Because that's what our life should be measured by, is how well we treat everybody else. And so, even in that statement, you're going to meet folks that are going to say good things about me, and you're going to meet folks that say bad things about me. And I say, believe them both, because their attitude, deserved that treatment. So, and that's what it'll be like up there if we make it. And so I'm not going to be able to change it all by myself. But if we elect people with the same mindset that are willing to fight, like you said, true fighters, maybe in 12 years we see a group of folks up there that can change the way something's going, move that ship a little bit in the right direction.
Well, you were talking about the TSA, and I know Senator Mike Lee has been encouraging Doge to cut the TSA completely, and I'm all for that. I'm sick of getting accosted every time that I go fly. But what is it about your message? You've said a little bit about it, and I think it ties into this, but that is different from right now. We know Daniel Cameron has already jumped out there and said that he's running. Pretty sure it looks like that Andy Barr, Congressman Barr, is going to jump out there. I know that Nate Morris has put his name out a little bit. I think maybe there's a Democrat from Hardin County as well that has put their name out there. So what is it about your message that is different, or is it different from some of what they're saying or their track record?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know any of them to have an opinion negatively as far as being firm on it. What I can say is I didn't run for Kentucky governor because I put my faith in Cameron, and it didn't work out. I don't know how in a state like Kentucky, who's 15 plus for Trump, loses to Daniel Cameron. But I think it probably had a lot to do with the Breonna Taylor thing. I mean, in Louisville. And so that would be my guess. But I know he did stand up for us a lot during the COVID times. And so I think that's what he's running on. But here's what I can tell you. There were people that were doing that for him. You know, I'm standing here doing this by myself. Well, with help from other Americans, not
right.
politicians, not legal scholars, not, paid to play scheme guys. Right. So, my message really is that I am these people. I'm living in the same, under the same thumb that they're under. I don't even own a suit right now. So that's got to be something obviously I got to look into. So that doesn't measure a man, but I'm just saying like that, most of the time I spend my days in utility pants, doing work or jeans and this when I call it a church dress. Right. So it's like, this is about where you'll see me until I got to get serious enough to get in that same bubble as them. But, to go on about Andy Barr, I don't know him well. I don't think it's smart that he come out and said, well, I'm going to wait and see what McConnell does. That should never be the way that you approach taking a stance and fighting for your people. I know he was mentored by him, same as I just recently found out that Daniel Cameron was as well. That worries me because I don't know how deep all those connections go. And in that same lack of trust is what drives me here to go, well, not a foe, but definitely not my best friend. And I'm not voting for you now. I'm going to vote for myself. So, and with Nate Morris, I think the first thing I've heard about him was he was a single mom family situation, but another guy that just to me, I don't feel is the same as me. He's not had those struggles that everybody else has. Maybe he was with a single mom, but they didn't look like they were doing too bad either. Even when she was raising him by herself, which is not anything bad. No. I don't have anything against that. But how far in the midst was he living under this thumb that everyone else is under, right? With that welfare state and overregulation and 100% control and surveillance state, cameras everywhere. Like, I don't know. He seems to be about the same age as me. I don't know. I don't know how old he is. But I mean, my message is clear. Like, just a small town boy, really, I'm a man now, obviously, but, I raised hay in the back with my family and we were just really simple people, did church every Sunday, did revivals, week-long revivals in Southern Baptist churches, which is where I was saved. So honestly, that's for that, for me, that is really the biggest part of this is being able to spread a little bit of that message to people too, because people need to understand that they don't have to be perfect, because you are children of God and you can be saved. And sometimes he puts you in weird places and takes you down paths you don't understand. But if you got the heart of a fighter, there's a reason like he's putting you in that weird spot. And so for me, that's what I'm following. I'm not going to stand there and preach because I don't know how to do it. But I'm just following that path of that calling of like that little voice in your heart that says, hey, this is your opportunity to try at least make a difference, and do something good for people. So that for me is what it's about.
Well, just in the last couple of weeks, we kind of got to know you a little bit, and we're doing this for this purpose. And I know that some of these guys, they're either self-wealthy or they'll have the donor class to some degree. Some of them will behind them, and a lot of it is about getting your message out there. So what is your intent or your goal, or what are some things of your strategy that you're looking that you're comfortable with sharing as far as just getting your message out there so people know who you are and what you're about? Yeah,
I mean, obviously the donation tactic is huge for the media and advertising, but honestly, I would rather run the cheapest campaign and win the seat, right? Because obviously that would make its own statement. But it is tough to do with these huge lobbies. And so, for me, like just recently, I've kind of really been, actually there was a young guy at a local restaurant, and he looked like basically a fighter. Like he looked like me. He looked like a young me. And I just said, hey man, you got a moment? And he said, yeah. I said, you follow politics at all? Like what do you know about what's going on in your state, in your country? And he goes, well, I don't really know much. I said, okay, well, is there anything that you can tell me that's negative and positive? And the first thing he said is like, well, I'm glad there's no tax on tips now. So people are paying attention to that, right? Yeah. So for me, that's the strategy, is just engage people where I can and try to be as normal as I can with these folks. And then, hit some meetings with like the local GOP, the Republican Party of Hardin County. And so they've reached out. They've been good to me. They've been very nice and pretty much said, yeah, come on in. Let's talk. Let's, get you into places where you need to be. And actually, they had suggested I find you, which I did. And then somehow you found me too, which was kind of another thing where you're like, well, that's really cool because obviously there's an alignment going on, right? Sir. And so, we have a website. I built it in about 6 hours by myself. It's me and my wife. And then I have a sister who's obviously very supportive and knows a couple folks in our local government. But, the strategy will just be to get the support, because that's really what it's about. I don't want all your money. What is it, like $1,000 to file the paperwork? I can pay that. That's no big deal.
Yeah.
The media is the problem. It's hard to get over that heel of even like at the local level. The News Enterprise did a great job, I think, and wrote pretty much exactly what we talked about. They didn't try to hit piece me, and the guy didn't know me, and he asked great questions. He even asked me, he said, hey, you're entering a wild game. So based on how you live now, what are you willing to change? And I said, well, I understand that, you have to be a little different because, well, first of all, I'm a tattooed, bearded guy that doesn't fit in with a lot of these people. But all these tattoos tell a story and they're important to me. And so I have them and I can still, pray, and I still have a God that loves me. And, but ultimately that support, driven by the locals, I think will then get the grassroots and hopefully spread out to, even if it's in like Breckenridge County, if they have their own Republican or GOP, like I'll speak to those people too. And I'll travel around. Gas is getting cheaper, so it's okay. I can drive around or I can fly, whatever. I got plenty of airline miles. So to me, it's, obviously it would be nice if people would donate, but I'm not going to run a campaign on that. If I can get the message out there that let's do this together, let's start this, because honestly, I just learned too that McConnell's seat was a 1984 win over a Democrat, who my sister was actually married to one of the family members years ago. But it's interesting that it's been that long ago. That's 40 years. And he was from Hardin County. And so I say, let's bring it back. Yeah. Let's bring it back to Hardin County. Let's let a guy who has the same troubles you're having or has had get up there and try to, start to change the ship a little bit.
Well, I said this when I ran my last campaign, and you're right. You can't improve on meeting people, looking people in the eyes, shaking their hand, letting them know who you are and what you're about, and being personable. You can't spend enough money to overcome that if you get to do enough of that, for one. But the aspect of going there to make a difference. And I said this, that I went to Frankfurt to change things there without letting it change me.
Right.
And I think that's so much of what I think people get buyer's remorse with candidates, is that there's a lot of things said on the campaign, but they go up there and they change. They bend, they bow. And the people begin to see that and see that they're paying attention. They see their voting record. They see the things that they said they would never vote for that they do. And, we see so much of that. And it's just refreshing to know that we have an open seat here to be able to see a difference, to be able to see a change take place that will not be more of the same. And that's the last thing that Kentucky needs, is the last thing that I want.
Yeah, and I think the state is done with that legacy, the 40-year legacy of what we've been seeing. And it baffles me that the man's voted the way he has on some things. I mean, especially representing Kentucky the way he has, and having such a spotlight, right? Because that is not Kentucky. Like, you go around just 10 miles from here, or right outside these doors, like, these people are not, they're not for that. So I think the people want this, but they got to support it. And so the only way to support it is to engage, share the message, reach out to me. Like, my number is a matter of public record on that website, which, if you don't mind me saying, is www.farisforsenate.com. And so just go to contact. The number's there at the bottom. Call me, text me. Let's have a conversation. Let's meet. If you want 2 people there, 100 people there, 1 person there, we can do it. Like, I'll make the time to figure out what it is your idea is and what you'd like to see. Because I can't do it by myself.
Right.
I don't have all the ideas, because even though I have struggled and I know what those struggles look like, I don't know them all. So I say just reach out. Let's have a conversation.
What other platforms are you on?
So I haven't officially made official campaign pages, but I have an Instagram that's Helly Bearded. I reactivated a Facebook page from 2013 that I deactivated just because I was done with that. And I made it 3 days and they locked my account. But I am on X as Michael Faris. And so, and then of course my company has one called Prime Hawks, but I'll probably change or maneuver one of those accounts to become the official campaign, page, maybe create another one. I don't know yet, because I have a little decent following on my personal page that I can engage with people, and it's really hard to start that up. We are still, 2 years out from this, but I don't know if that's enough time to, still get that same shareability. Right. And they throttle you and they censor you. Like, you'd be amazed at like what engagement I've had on some things, and then a big issue like fighting the government with the lawsuit or the TSA thing, like how it gets throttled. Right. And like, honestly, I'm thankful that, Jim and Joe Hoft, like, were putting these pieces on Gateway Pundit, which then led me to Tommy, and then landed me at Andy Frizello's place with First Form, another great patriot who has his own podcast as well. Not to plug him, but it's he's saying all the same stuff, and he's basically telling the men, get up, get out, do your job, and then where you see troubles, go in and engage in those and turn the ship and make it right. So just for me, I'm just a regular fella. That's it. I don't have a bunch of money, so I'm going to do what I can without obviously going completely bankrupt, even though I'd love to just be able to just everything I got into it. We all still have to live. I will make as many sacrifices as I probably possibly can. But I definitely don't want to put my wife and kid in something that's worse than what we're already in, which is that lawsuit, right? And then now this is going to be, if it goes anywhere with the right heads.
4 years from Joe Biden too. So,
well, yeah. And then I just recently learned about this guy that Nicola, he was basically chastised for 4 years on the Biden admin. I didn't even know, like, I knew the guy through mutual people, but they basically went after him. And like Trump pardoned him.
Yeah. There were so many people. We worked with a national team with a lot of the J6ers that were released with the pardons, and there were so many people that were now learning that the Biden administration had went after for whatever reason, just absolutely destroying their lives, And just, specifically your type of situation, the fact that you're having to spend your own money to fight the government, your family's having to go through it, and just what little bit of persecution that you've been through, and to see some of these people literally thrown in jail, fighting the court system without money to do it, lost their jobs, lost their houses, someone lost their family. It's just unreal what we have been through. And so I'm thankful that President Trump got elected. I like a lot of the things that he's done with executive order. But if we do not get people in Congress that will put this stuff into law, we are headed back to this again.
Stroke of a pen, it gets 180'd. And actually, I believe I was going to mention something about those DOJ lawyers. And so they're still getting all these emails. I don't mean to go way back, but every time anything in this case is filed with this mask mandate, they're still on that lawsuit. Even though they're not a part of it anymore, the DOJ, and these are the same people, why are they there? Like something's got to change there.
Right.
There should be somebody else now looking at this and going, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should reach out to the guy, right? And really, what's his name? Duffy.
Sean Duffy.
Yeah. And so I had wrote Rand Paul way in the beginning. He reached out to the DOT on my behalf. And he said, hey, I'll get back with you. They basically just gave me the run-of-the-mill answer. And when I get another answer, I'll get back with you. Well, obviously, they still didn't say anything, so I re-inquired. Said, hey, still got this lawsuit. We got Sean Duffy there now. Can we poke him on the shoulder? And this time, I'm not sure why, but he just said, hey, it's a legal matter. I can't get into it. And it's there. Now, I'd like to have a conversation with him because I even told him in that email, like, I'm also going to run for the Senate seat in Kentucky. I'd like to speak to you about that.
Right.
And I don't know who handles his emails and how that ends up going, but if Rand Paul hears this, let's have a conversation. If Thomas Massey hears it, let's have a conversation. Let's poke Duffy. Let's get the DOT to do their job and undo this backlog of whatever's going on. Because it's not just me.
Right.
There's something like another 20 folks that I know of, and it could be worse. And what I find interesting about the whole thing is under the Biden administration, they set out this record-breaking $50 million judgment because they broke wheelchairs over so many years, right? But then you follow that money, and where does it go? Well, $25 million of it, we're going to give it to the airlines to improve the program. If they don't do it in this time, the Treasury gets $25 million. And then we'll give the guys who got their wheelchair broke a little bit of money. But no, I mean, the message is, listen, somebody up there, pay attention, because look, I'm not going anywhere. I started this fight as a youngster, and it's just, here we are now. And so I'm not backing down. And so I'm coming one way or the other. So just be ready for it. I'm here.
No, it's great to meet. It's great to meet you. It really is. And just to know that you're actually really close here. You're right outside of my district. But it's been an honor to get to know you a little bit and find out about you. And I'm glad that there are fighters out there that I don't even know about that are fighting the good fight. And I wish I would have known about your situation. Maybe I should have been paying closer attention with you being as close as you are to me. But any time that we can engage in a fight together, I think it just makes it that much stronger. We can take it to them when we band together. And so we need to do that as citizens, but we got to get people in our government that are willing to do that. Right. I tell people all the time that, so we do, on the state level, we do our budget on even years, and we do a 2-year budget. So on odd years, we only have a 30-day session. And so we ought to just spend every 30-day session doing nothing but repealing laws. Let's not put one more reg onto people. Let's repeal stuff. Let's make people's lives easier. And the foundational principles that this country was built upon, we have to have people that are willing to continue to fight for those things, you know, on our free speech and freedom of religion and our Second Amendment rights and the life issue. All of those issues are so important that while we are focusing on today's issues, we can't forget about the foundation that enabled us to make it this long, and we have to protect it. So
yeah, and you know, honestly, thank you, Josh, for doing this, because like you said, you are out of my district. You don't owe me anything, so you're doing the right thing by saying, hey, let's have that conversation. Let's see where it goes. And so to me, that's important, and I'm absolutely honored to meet you as well. And just thank you from the bottom of my heart.